Welcome to our WWE Elimination Chamber post show. I am John Pollock with Ting on a Saturday evening coming out of the card in Saudi Arabia. Hello, Wei.
Hey, John, what's up? How you doing?
Not much. We have a lot to get into. A lot happened on this show, a bunch of news to get into as well. And we will also make some time for your feedback at the end of the show. So just overall, Wei, you've had a few hours to process. What did you think overall of the event today?
Well, actually, I just finished it up until us recording here, so it's still kind of fresh. But overall, well, first of all, I want to encourage people to check out your podcast that you did earlier in the week with David Bixenspan and Brandon Thurston. To me, it's really like the more important show to listen to when we're talking about any of these Saudi Arabia events. But I thought you three did a great job kind of lining out the history of the events up until this point, and really it's like, you know, the half of the story beyond just the show itself. But that aside, we're here to talk about the actual professional wrestling product, and as a show, I thought it was an entertaining show. I thought it was, you know, had a very good atmosphere, and I thought the wrestling delivered creatively, in ring. You know, it was a fun show.
The major news coming out was the outcome that I think a lot of people expected, and that is Brock Lesnar winning the WWE Championship in the main event, but with, I guess, the twist of the way that they eliminated Bobby Lashley from the match. He didn't get involved at all. He was taken out of the match, and the news coming out of it from Kazim Femude over on the Ringer podcast was stating that, you know, it's what he had heard was that Lashley has a shoulder injury and could be out for some time. I have only heard about this in like the last hour or so, so I've been asking around. I cannot confirm that, but it certainly adds up when you look at some of the suplexes that he took at the Royal Rumble that people were concerned about during that night, and the fact he has not wrestled since the Royal Rumble, including an episode of Raw that was in Denver, and he got that, you know, in his hometown, no less, not even doing any kind of match. So certainly the way this was laid out was certainly would support that theory that he could be dealing with an injury. And I guess the question would be if it's ultimately he is going to be out for a period of time. Kazim had stated that he expects him to be out for 4 months, which would obviously eliminate him from WrestleMania.
Yeah, well, that is unfortunate news, of course. In the fact that they were able to keep this hidden for as long up until this point is interesting. The fact that they decided to build this match so much around Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley, you know, if the report is true that, you know, the man was never set to be an active participant in the match, is also very interesting.
You also have to look at the timeline. That Rumble show, that was a Saturday. The Monday, they set up this whole chamber match. And what was the timeline of maybe thinking, how bad is the injury? Can I work through it? If there's any time of year that you're going to push through an injury, it's now. But maybe it's the case that he just cannot work through this, because it was the type of elimination for Lashley that, I mean, it's like they seemed like they wanted to do the most minimal physical involvement here in terms of taking him out. It wasn't as though they even did like a big spot to take him out or anything of that case. So it certainly leads a lot of credence that he would be hurt.
Well, watching the spot, I mean, I simply felt it was probably their way of trying to protect Bobby Lashley by having him lose the championship, not even by not getting pinned, but not being an active participant in the match at all. So he wouldn't, I mean, because it's an elimination match, he would not have to get pinned whatsoever. So in that sense, I thought booking-wise, it worked creatively. If not, you know, of course, being a bit unsatisfying given that so much of the build was for Brock's interaction with Bobby Lashley in the match. But I mean, if there's an injury, that's understandable as well.
So we'll get into all of it, but let's go to the beginning of the show. But that was definitely the headline coming out of the show. The announcers for the card were Michael Cole, Corey Graves, and Byron Saxton. And we had the kickoff show featuring The Miz and Rey Mysterio. No Maurice in the corner of The Miz, but Dominic was with Rey. Very heated crowd at the beginning of this. I mean, all behind Rey, booing The Miz. Dominic was in the corner and would toss Miz back into the ring. Miz got the heat for a while. And then as the referee's back was turned, Dominic threw I guess this was his tribute to Shane McMahon. One of the worst looking punches you were going to see. Just a terrible looking punch from the floor. And Miz then hits a DDT, sets up for the skull crushing finale, and Ray counters, sets up for the 619, hits it, teases the frog splash, and Miz is crawling out. Dominic pulls a chair away from the Miz, and the Miz, behind the referee's back, sends himself into the steps, which the referee turns around, believes that Dominic was the culprit, and goes to eject Dominic. And then Ray is rammed into the corner, but counters the skull-crushing finale with a roll-up, and Ray pins the Miz in 9 minutes and 16 seconds. Miz would come back for a post-match, which got Dominic involved, and they hit a double 619, and both executing frog splashes on the Miz.
Yeah, seemed like a fun opener. Very hot crowd that loved Rey Mysterio, saw him as a big superstar, and I thought the Miz played a pretty tremendous old school heel here in front of a Saudi Arabian crowd, which I think feels very much more like an old school crowd that cheers for the baby faces and boos the heels. And for some reason in these Saudi Arabia shows, typically the baby faces come out on top. We typically get more happy endings on shows that take place here.
So the notable aspect of this was later in the show when the Miz cut a promo that he was outnumbered by the Mysterios, and he is going to go make a phone call for a superlative athlete to come. And PWInsider.com was the first to note that the word going around was that this would lead to Logan Paul as the partner. And I was told that is the plan. So tag team match at WrestleMania with the Miz and Logan Paul against the Mysterios.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, more interaction from Logan Paul. Did he wrestle last time? I forget.
He took the stunner last year. He was in Sami Zayn's corner and took the stunner from Owens.
A proper match.
This would be, in theory, yes, an actual tag match. And I guess it'll be interesting. Like I hear about Jake Paul every single week. Like there's no question that he, to me, is the bigger of the two. And Logan Paul, it just seems to me that his public profile has just been a lot lower since the Floyd Mayweather fight last year. And I don't know. I don't know if this one will be a real meaningful difference maker for WrestleMania. It's kind of an undercard feud. And to me, the best kind of celebrity involvement is kind of when you have like a big heated grudge with stars. And this feels more like it's a cameo appearance of Logan Paul doing wrestling, but we should also see what the storyline is and how the buildup is and see if this has some substance to it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in terms of celebrity and relevancy, I feel like he's at least probably higher up than Johnny Knoxville, even with the movie out, I personally feel. But I also don't partake in any of the content that either of those two really produce. So I might not be the target audience. I would think for them, simply having the attachment of a Paul brother who seems, actively interested in participating in pro wrestling is probably, something that they're attracted to. The bar is set very high with Bad Bunny. I don't really anticipate the same with the Paul brother, but as a heel, I think it could be, it feels like WrestleMania like.
All celebrities are going to be judged on the Bad Bunny scale. Like that is going to kind of be the high bar that has been set now that you're going to place upon a Logan Paul. The idea of just showing up and you've done like a week of training and can do a few spots. I think people have a higher expectation level now.
Yes.
So the show proper began with one of many gigantic fireworks displays as Michael Cole, with maybe the greatest qualifier I've ever heard for a venue, welcomed us to the largest concrete dome in the world. A sold-out show at the Jeddah Superdome.
The largest concrete dome. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Is this the same one that's like without pillars?
Yes. Though they never mentioned that here. This was like, the pillarless concrete dome.
It's both. I mean, it's probably the concrete that makes it so strong without pillars, I'm guessing.
That is it. Yes.
Oh.
So then starting off the show is Roman Reigns and Bill Goldberg for the Universal Championship. And Reigns is at 537 days as champion, comes out with the Usos and Paul Heyman. But the Usos would go to the back because they had a big match to prepare for. And Reigns addressed the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to acknowledge him as Goldberg makes his entrance. And They go to the floor early on. Reigns comes off the ropes and gets hit with a spear, but counters the jackhammer with a uranagi, or a rock bottom like maneuver, as Corey Graves coined it. Superman punch is delivered to Goldberg, and then Reigns calls for another spear, and Goldberg cuts him off with his own. Reigns blocks the jackhammer, applies the guillotine. They go to the mat, and Goldberg goes out at 5:59. Reigns wins in emphatic fashion to go into WrestleMania. And from all accounts, including Goldberg, who had stated this could be his final WWE match, this was supposed to be the last match on his deal, unless there's a new one. And this certainly felt like this was our final match on a deal kind of booking.
Sure. Although it feels similar to, I think, most of these Goldberg matches where, I mean, he loses almost all of them. Yet by the time the next cycle comes around, he just shows up, asks for a title match, and they grant it to him. And usually the response, at least in Saudi Arabia, is pretty decent, provided that, he could pull off the performance that I think is expected of the Bill Goldberg character. And I felt like he did here. It was a pretty brief match, and I think it benefited from it. It was satisfying, had the pace of an exciting MMA fight where heavyweight shots, if they land, and if they connect, if a submission hits, the match could end at any second. It created that feeling. I thought ahead of the match, they managed to create a pretty special feeling of two superstars. Roman being as hot as he is right now, I think certainly helped. And by the time it began, at least, with this atmosphere, it felt like they achieved that dream match feeling that I think they were looking for. And I thought Goldberg, this was a match where he came across like Goldberg, and it didn't show any of his limitations. We never saw a jackhammer. We saw it attempted and it was cut off, but, at this point, probably for the better. So given, I think, how much he might add in terms of star power and attraction to one of these Saudi cards, I can see them re-upping this deal.
I see him, with the cards in Saudi Arabia, you don't have a giant amount of these levels of stars. I think it really comes down to the price tag of what you are willing to spend on a Bill Goldberg, with the knowledge that for twice a year, he can mean something on these cards. Though I do feel it is going to somewhat be less and less. We're talking about a guy who's now 55, and it's very hard to play Bill Goldberg when you're 55. And the other side of it is, would Bill Goldberg be somebody that AEW would be intrigued by?
I'm sure the answer would be yes, but for that price, I don't think he means as much to an AEW fan base as. But then again, maybe Tony Khan at this point is not necessarily after a typical AEW fan base, and he's looking for.
You've got your great workers, like you're buying the star power of what a Goldberg brings. It's the same thing WWE is bringing. Like, you're not hiring Bill Goldberg for great wrestling matches, and they've got that in droves. So that's just part of the thinking. If you're WWE, it's not just, well, we can use them or no one uses them. It's like that comes with the fact that we have an alternative that is always looking for people that are going to generate interest.
I'm sure Bill Goldberg would love to be able to, use both sides for his bargaining power. And I can very much see WWE wanting to re-up Goldberg simply because AEW wouldn't want him. But if I'm AEW, I just don't think your brand is built on, attraction as much as it is a combination of both attraction and in-ring quality, which I think at this point we know Goldberg can't necessarily deliver unless, you keep them in short bursts. I mean, not to say it's impossible, but for the price tag that I feel like he would be commanding, I don't really see it happening.
Then the women's Elimination Chamber match: Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, Nikki Ash, Doudrop, Liv Morgan, and Alexa Bliss, with the winner challenging for the Raw Women's title at WrestleMania. And we should note, for all of the women on this show, this was not the previous attire where they had the big baggy shirts. This was more so like actual like wrestling gear, bodysuits, a variation, but still covered up.
It only took them maybe like a couple of years, but they finally gave up the custom printed dollar store t-shirt look for the women, which was actually very sad to see in previous incarnations. This time, let me just say, all the people, the team, all the seamstresses, or the whoever was responsible for the women's wardrobes on this show, they did a fantastic job. Everybody on this show, in the women's roster, I thought looked tremendous. They actually looked like athletes in some cases, even superheroes. Even the ones who don't have the superhero gimmick came across like actual stars. And they all look great, especially in the Ronda match.
Yeah, and that might have been outside of WWE's control in the past as well.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean,
but still, like, you put some effort in the t-shirts. Like, they were literally the cheapest looking printing that they weren't even selling it on like WWE Shop on the last ones.
So the match started off with Nikki Ash and Liv Morgan, and Nikki is slamming on Rhea's pod as they had a face-off with her and Rhea in a pod. Then Nikki walked up to Alexa Bliss in her pod, and Liv just smashes her into the pod. And we got a bit more aggression out of Nikki Ash. And man, these entrances were fast and furious. Both chamber matches. These were the two shortest chamber matches in the 20-year history of this concept. And
were they at least consistent? Like, what were the intervals?
Kind of all over the place. I mean, generally, like the first entrant was at the 2-minute mark, then at the 4:35 mark. All the entrants were in within 9 minutes and 15 seconds. So it was very fast. I mean, in the past, I recall it was like 5 minutes for the first one and maybe 4
I think is too long.
Some others. Some of the times it's a bit lengthy. Like I don't think the length of these was necessarily a negative, but I did feel like a bit of a rush to get all of the women in here until we got to our final two. But nonetheless, Doudrop is in third, and Nikki offers her hand but gets headbutted, and Doudrop just starts beating on Liv and Nikki. And she's grinding Liv's face into the fence, yelling, "Isn't she so beautiful?" Rhea Ripley comes in, and Nikki is frightened. They climb the cage, and Rhea knocks her off, landing onto the others. Riptide, Nikki Ash is gone. First elimination. And that's the latest nail in the coffin of this former tag team. Fifth entrant is Alexa Bliss, who did not bring Lily with her. So just 5 days after her therapist gave her this life-saving advice, she did not take it. Liv was shoved off the top turnbuckle by Doudrop, and her knee actually got caught here coming down, and was holding the knee afterwards. Comes back with a sunset bomb to eliminate Doudrop, and then the final entrant is Bianca Belair. The highlight here was Belair doing a one-arm military press onto Liv, and then Belair and Ripley got into it. They did dual vertical suplexes, and then the two of them got into an exchange of strikes, slaps. There's a KOD, and Ripley lands on her feet. Liv comes out and hits both with double knees. And then Bliss lays out Liv Morgan, twisted Bliss. And I could just hear Liv's promo from this week that you're going to literally have to destroy me to eliminate me. Well, the twisted Bliss destroyed her, and out goes Liv Morgan.
It's a devastating move. What can we say?
Belair then is able to, Rhea goes for the Riptide on Alexa, and Belair stops it with a clothesline, but in doing so, Bliss is able to DDT Ripley, and then Rhea gets hit with the KOD, so Belair eliminates Ripley, and we're down to Bliss and Belair. They had a couple of minutes here. Belair missed a 450 splash, blocked the DDT, and then counters with a handspring into a moonsault. Bliss gets the knees up, and then a forearm sets up the KOD, and Belair wins. 15 minutes, 42 seconds, and it will be Bianca Belair challenging for the Raw Women's title at WrestleMania.
Felt like a pretty straightforward match. I certainly didn't mind the quick pace of it. A match like this was really just there to get to the result, because I thought the action, while I thought successful, they pulled the match off. I wouldn't say it was really remarkable by any means, though I do feel like at least all the major players like Alexa Bliss, like Bianca, got some decent spots to shine. I thought Bliss looked pretty good on her return, so I think, whatever she was dealing with, and seems like she's in great shape to be able to have a full return, puts Bianca Belair in a Mania title match 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I would say if anything, I thought that the Belair Ripley match on Raw Monday was significantly more interesting than any kind of pairings we got in this whole thing. It just felt like we had to get through a lot of eliminations in a quick amount of time, try to give everyone a modicum of shine, and it was a foregone conclusion about who was winning. So I can't say this was a very memorable Elimination Chamber match, but I'm glad they went. I'm fine going with the obvious choice. You don't need to go and surprise people just because this is the time of the year where it does get kind of predictable when you can see directions that they're going. And that was the best outcome here with Bianca just winning in clear fashion and sets up the Mania program. Charlotte Flair and Sonya Deville against Ronda Rousey and Naomi with one arm tied behind Ronda Rousey's back. And we mentioned the outfits for everyone. I would say the most unique one was Ronda Rousey using her gi that she used to win the bronze medal in 2008, wrestling in a gi for the first time.
It was really interesting, like on a show where, all the women kind of came out with like really different ideas, including, I thought Naomi looked amazing in her full-on psychedelic, like bodysuit and her braids. She looked incredible. But Ronda Rousey decided to come out like in almost a complete opposite direction, totally dressing down, I would say, and instead using the opportunity where you're required to cover up, to put on her Olympic judo gi, complete with her black belt, and even going down to her lack of makeup, just like, exactly the way she looked competing in the Olympics, which I thought was really fascinating. I actually thought was really cool.
I thought it was a cool idea. Whoever thought of this as, she can't wear her traditional attire and came up with something that made a lot of sense and kind of added to the match. So Rousey's arm is tied behind her back, and Deville reveals that her arm is healed, and she takes off the sling. Flair would distract, allowing Deville to attack Rousey, and Flair would tag, but then get out because she's avoiding Rousey. Rousey goes for a throw and sets up for the arm bar when Flair attacks her in the good arm, sending her into the shoulder, so the heels get the advantage. Flair eventually pulls her by the rope to prevent the tag to Naomi, and Flair is going to go for her own arm bar, but gets stopped by kicks. Naomi's in. There was this one big miss where Naomi went for this jumping like Hurricane Rana, and it just did not connect here with Flair, who just rolled through on it, but then followed with this corkscrew pescado to the floor. Rousey hits Piper's Pit onto Deville, stares down Charlotte as she applies a one-armed armbar and submits Deville in 9 minutes and 14 seconds as Charlotte just stayed on the apron, making no effort to save her partner. And I think doing enough to kind of they did not really do much of any kind of Rousey-Charlotte involvement other than Charlotte having the brief advantage. So kind of the idea of keeping those two as separate as they could in a tag scenario.
Yeah, kept it fresh while at the same time, continuing to build the feud by having Ronda wanting to attack Charlotte and Charlotte evading, and then even in the finish here, as she applied her arm/shoulder lock on Sonya, like specifically directing the threats to Charlotte as she was doing it. I wasn't exactly sure how this stipulation was going to go when they announced it, because I think we saw Ronda's return, and at least I had some concerns about, the effect of ring rust on her, whether or not she'd be able to pull off a regular match, much less a match where she had to work with one arm. But I thought she really did. I thought this was a very entertaining match, and I thought everybody did a very good job here. Ronda pulled off some really good looking offense with one arm tied. In fact, I thought showcased an ability of hers that is exclusive to her and no other professional wrestler on this roster, male or female, that she was able to pull off. Like, her judo looked fantastic here. So I thought the match actually increased her value as Charlotte's opponent for me.
I think Ronda Rousey is way more interesting when she's incorporating like her judo. I don't know if you can necessarily have too many opponents that can do a sustained match like that, but I think that is where Rousey can shine and be different from everybody else on the roster, as opposed to trying to do wrestling at, I would say, certainly a better level than many at her experience level. But it's the judo side that it feels legitimate because it is legitimate, and the audience, you're not trying to convince the audience. You have the audience that knows her prior background. So I think it's a way to really lean into it. I don't know if you can structure a whole WrestleMania match around that, but I think elements of it should certainly be present in that match with regards to the Charlotte program.
I thought it was a great advertisement for judo, like, especially if you for some reason don't have the use of one of your other arms, like in judo, you I mean, of course your limbs are important, but your body itself, your torso is another limb. And her control of just her body weight and ability to utilize it for these throws is just really incredible.
So between now and WrestleMania, should we get at least one promo from Jean LaBelle? Everyone talks about Ronda having a mouthpiece.
I hope so. Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
He can come on and threaten to burn someone's house down.
Is that a famous Jean LaBelle promo?
There was one time when we were at Cauliflower Alley and we were just getting stingers from different wrestlers for the Fight Network. And I just went up to him and explained the premise of identify yourself. You're watching the Fight Network. He's like, okay. Are you ready? This is Judo Jean LaBelle. Watch the Fight Network or I'll burn your house down.
Wow.
Like, perfect. Nice. That was a keeper. So Judo Jean, maybe we will get him. There was actually one time, another Judo Jean LaBelle story was the Ultimate Fighter. When Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate were the coaches, they did a screening of the first episode in Boston for that first FS1 card. So they invited members of the media to this screening where Ronda and Miesha Tate were there to take questions. And Rousey was just, I guess, not really interested in doing a whole lot of this. And I asked what I thought was a pretty basic question of, could we see any appearance by Jean LaBelle in this season that you might bring in for an episode? And I cannot remember the exact answer, but she did not appreciate the question and was just
what?
Didn't seem too happy that day. Yes.
Okay, interesting.
But everyone's allowed to have bad days, so maybe just caught her on a bad one. So Drew McIntyre, Madcap Moss. This could have been a bad day for Madcap Moss. This was the scariest moment of the entire show, with Falls Count Anywhere match. And Happy Corbin is out with Riddick Moss, Madcap Moss. Also worth noting, Jessica Carr was the referee for this match. And in the early part, they go up the stage. Moss is sent into the LED screen. Corbin's getting involved, trying to prevent the power bomb off the stage. And then they double team Drew. They go back to the ring, and this is when Drew makes his comeback, throws Moss across the ring with a belly-to-belly, and then lifts him up for the inverted Alabama slam that he's done many times. But on this one, dropped Riddick Moss, who just spikes his head onto the mat. This is one of the nastiest falls you are going to see. I was stunned that this man continued with this match. They showed multiple replays of this. It looked brutal. With each successive replay, it's like he continued the match. Hopefully he is all right, because this just looked so frightening.
It really did, yeah. It looked like Moss just like decided to tuck instead of, it's kind of like the Styles Clash, like decided to tuck on maybe on instinct instead of landing face first. But they must have been pretty confident, and he must have been able to communicate to the people in the back that he was okay, because they were freely showing a replay of this all throughout. And of course, Moss continued the rest of the match.
Yeah,
so hopefully he's okay now.
Yeah, I mean, when the adrenaline wears off, like it was a really nasty looking spike. But they continued, and it wasn't even a case of like everyone froze or there was this awkwardness. Like they pretty much just continued, and they go to the floor where Moss was thrown over the desk and suplexed, took a superplex, future shock DDT, and then Corbin enters and Drew swings the sword that Corbin ducks, and Drew holds up Angela while hitting the Claymore and stands on top of Moss holding the sword in 927, and then gestured towards Corbin with the sword, indicating he is next. And that looks to be where this is going. And, head spike aside, I will say, I think Madcap Moss has looked very good in these matches with Drew McIntyre. He needs to lose this gimmick yesterday, because I do feel there's a lot of potential in this guy. And I hope like a performance like this can show like this is a great athlete who works very hard. He's got improvements to make, of course, but like Corbin, to me, he's at the level Corbin is going to be. Like he can be happy Corbin, he can be angry Corbin, he can be broke Corbin. It doesn't matter. But Moss, I would not want to leave him in this Joker character for too long to where the audience just writes him off as some 24/7 guy. I think that there is a lot of potential in him, but he has got to lose this character.
I mean, he should have never had it to begin with. I I think there's certainly talent there for sure. Yeah. But the thing is, he's working in a company where the in-ring talent is not enough. You know,
But this guy also has a look that I think would be very appealing as well. On top of it, like he has a few things working for him.
I guess you would think so, but I mean, he's also working for a man who doesn't care as much about that stuff unless he embodies a character or a sense of humor that works for him. And Vince, for some reason, is attracted to this idea of a guy telling terrible jokes. So if this is his way of getting, like, it's kind of like Chad Gable. If this is his way of like getting onto TV so that he can have matches, then I guess you take what you can get. You know, it was a win for Drew, and crowd was into it, I suppose, and they set up the Corbin match for Mania probably.
So we got 6 more weeks.
Yeah, I know.
That's just a long time to get to Drew and Corbin. I hope they have some kind of idea for this beyond just more jokes for 6 weeks. And the threat of a sword. Maybe he's going to threaten to behead Corbin at AT&T Stadium.
Maybe
that was the tease here. Yeah. Then it was the Miz promo about contacting a partner, and Becky Lynch against Lita for the Raw Women's title. Lynch came out with her goat jacket, literally, because there were 2 goats on the shoulders of this jacket.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if they're selling this one at WWE Shop. Becky took like the first 6 minutes of this match, and the idea is that she is just too good for Lita. She's dominating it. And after several Beck sploders, the third one, Lita stops her and counters with a DDT, and a twist of fate gets stopped. Disarmer is countered, and Becky rolls her up, grabs the bottom rope that she's won multiple matches with, but Lita kicks the arm off and then attempts to go for a sleeper. This was not quite. This would not get you your next belt if you were applying this rear naked choke way. Not exactly applied, but the effort was there. There's a power bomb out of the corner by Lita, and then Becky rolls away to avoid the moonsault. And then Lita did the Trish spot with like the handstand in the corner into the Rana, and then drives Becky's head into the mat, climbs up, but is yanked down. Becky gets the disarmer, and she lifts her before the rope and then turns it into a manhandle slam. Lita gets her foot on the rope. Becky goes for her own moonsault and misses. She then gets hit with the twist of fate, and Lita climbs up. She goes and hits the moonsault for the big near fall of the match. And then Lita just lifts up Becky to her feet and gets hit with the manhandle slam out of nowhere. And Lita is pinned in 12 minutes and 14 seconds.
Yeah, the finish felt a little abrupt, but I mean,
it felt way too quick for me. It was almost like Lita like helped her up and then walked into her own demise. I just thought I was very abrupt to go from the near fall to boom, the manhandle slam. But nonetheless, I thought this match turned out better than I expected. I did not have the largest of hopes for this one, but I would say, honestly, this was probably one of Lita's like better singles matches that you're going to find.
Yeah, I thought the match greatly exceeded my expectations. I did not expect the Lita main event to go this length. I didn't expect it to be filled with as much activity and sequences as it was, and I didn't expect Lita to pull off, half of what she did as well after being away from the ring, at least in a singles capacity for such a long time. I thought as far as a comeback singles match goes, she had a great one, and I think her offense is certainly not the prettiest. Her technical wrestling is never going to be a strong suit. Her punches are never going to be a strong suit. But I was not expecting it to. Did Lita look as good as she ever had before? I would say yes. And in fact, I would say her timing was there. Her cardio was absolutely there, along, of course, with her star power and her connection to the crowd. So as a babyface, she absolutely worked here. And the match, I think, was a lot better than I thought it had any right to be. Even, coming back for a standing ovation, which I actually felt was totally earned. It didn't feel contrived. I thought Lita, pulled off, a pretty entertaining match here. So do you see her sticking around?
I don't think it's needed. I think this probably over-delivered in terms of what they hoped for. I also think this was kind of the furthest you could go for it. Like, you don't have her. I think you can only do this kind of, the veteran comes back, tries to go for the title, loses. Like, it's not to say you can't do anything with Lita in the future. There's a lot of women on this roster. I don't know if you necessarily need to continue past this.
I think, I mean, because she's gotten into such great shape, and because I think reviews coming off of this match, they'll be very impressed by. I think you could.
Well, here's the other one. Sorry to interrupt, but like we do know, like, there was AEW interest, and again, that is going to go into your thinking. Is that if we don't use you, and again, she's gotten into great shape, comes out of this probably with a pretty happy result. And yeah, if they're still interested, like a Britt Baker Lita program, does WWE want to hand them that after she's just had this relatively nice comeback?
Totally. Absolutely. Like, I mean, and even though I think the Becky match might have been the most interesting one of anybody that's around, I mean, you still have a whole roster of people. And if you needed a big opponent for Bianca Belair after she wins the title, Belair versus Lita or whatever, like Charlotte, Sasha, like, take your pick, right?
I mean, they shot the angle with Charlotte and then just transferred it over to Becky. And we know how quick the thinking is. Like, Lita did the Rumble and then gets a call like the next day, hey, you want to come back in 3 weeks? So it's not like this is mapped out for months.
I do think she offers something because, yeah, Lita is like one of those Attitude Era level names where if you needed somebody to justify a headlining, at least, title match for a pay-per-view with minimal build, to hopefully attract maybe people that aren't watching week to week, I think she is like an important piece of the puzzle that they can use. So if she wants it, I could definitely see them picking her up and sticking around.
Second from the top was the SmackDown tag titles with the Usos defending against the Viking Raiders. The Viking Raiders come down. They get jumped on the floor. It's 2-on-1 on Ivar after Eric was sent into the steps, and then they suplexed Ivar on top of Eric. The two Vikings, these two warriors, are in no condition to perform. The announcers state they can physically not go. And given the buildup, this was perfect.
Match of the night.
Yes.
I thought. The best match I've ever seen between these two teams. No,
there was not one complaint.
Not at all. Like, it was. This would have been a filler match anyway. The build has been pretty shit. Stealing helmets and whatever. Like, they could have a helmet stealing contest, hide and seek with the helmets instead. But this is really more so a TV title match than I think something that needed to pad this already 3-hour show out.
And that takes us to the main event with Bobby Lashley, Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, Riddle, and Austin Theory. Elimination Chamber for the WWE Championship. So Theory comes out. He's taking selfies with the guys in the pods. Lesnar is out last to this incredible reaction. I would argue it was probably the loudest of the show. And he comes out last, but he is not starting the match. Instead, Theory and Rollins begin. And the crowd is humming along with Rollins' theme when the bell rings. Theory's arm is wrapped around the fence as he lands a rolling elbow and then power bombs Theory into Lashley's pod, and it knocks Lashley down. The trainers come to check on him and is taken out of the Elimination Chamber, and their reasoning was he has entered concussion protocol. And that was it. That was all for Bobby Lashley. So they got him out of the match and explained there will be a new WWE champion, which I think everyone realized where this was going to go. Riddle was in third at the 310 mark. Then AJ Styles at 550. Theory sent Styles and Rollins off the turnbuckle and then was hit with a floating bro. And Riddle did his Randy Orton spots, was calling for the RKO when the countdown began. And this was supposed to be Lashley's entrance. So instead, Lesnar just joined the match at that point and just runs through everybody here. F5 to Rollins, pins him. F5 to Riddle, pins him. F5 to AJ, pins him. I mean, you could just brand everyone here. It's like we have one superstar. We have the guy that is losing the title that we are going to eliminate from the match without branding as a loser. And then geek.
It is unfortunate, but I thought it was awesome. Like, I think when you have like the sort of scenario that you could pose here of having a real life Hulk just run wild on everybody after, he's unleashed out of the cage. I thought this was so entertaining, and that distinction between levels of competitors was already there prior even to this match. So
it was, and way both can be true. Like this in a vacuum is a very entertaining, monster running through everybody, while at the same time it's a larger issue of like a Rollins, for instance, like just putting him at this level. Like these are your guys that you are very much relying upon. Riddle, AJ, I think they're kind of already at a certain level to people. Rollins, I see this is the guy that they had to protect last month with Roman Reigns. Not so much the case 3 weeks later, where he was just fodder here for Lesnar. But I mean, that is what they are putting everything into Reigns and Lesnar. But I think there is a damaging effect here to some of your other stars when they are presented like this.
But I'm just thinking of the alternative. What would you have Rollins go 5 minutes with Brock in an even, 50-50 interaction? I don't think that would have been nearly as good.
Well, then you could argue, why was Rollins in this match?
Why have this match at all? Why have Brock at all in the match?
To get the championship, obviously.
So what do you do? How do you book it? How do you make Brock look strong? I mean, it's like you can cut.
Brock is strong. Brock is strong before and after this.
He's even stronger after this. And
Seth is even weaker. Like
who's the main event?
Okay, wait, that is fine that you're building up your main event, but you can
somebody has to lose. Okay, like somebody has to.
But we're not arguing about wins and losses. We're arguing about the way in which this was done. This was done in just quick succession, and this was just a quick elimination.
I guess I'm just less focused on who's taking the pin in these and how quick they're taking the pin, and more on how entertaining it was to see Brock Lesnar go crazy.
Okay, but last month you argued the opposite with Rollins and Reigns, that you thought it was no problem. I argued that it was less entertaining with the finish that they did, and the argument was...
Remind me about the finish. What was the finish?
Where the rope break, and it ended in the DQ because he did not acknowledge the 5 count. And the idea was like, this is Seth Rollins, who you want to protect to a degree coming out of this. And that's what they did. So why not just have him lose a couple of weeks ago to Roman Reigns?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. Yeah,
like, I don't know why they Rollins was the main one. Like Riddle and AJ, and Theory are already viewed here. But Rollins to me is like, he is one of your main heels on Raw. And I think he was just kind of caught in this tornado of eliminations that it damages him unless you don't view him.
But that's a great choice of word. That's a great choice of words, John. A tornado. Like no matter how great you are, no matter how strong how big your palace is, like in the middle of a giant tornado, everybody goes down. And I don't think you necessarily. I don't look at Rollins as really that much more hurt coming out of this particular match than I don't know, like if he wasn't a part of it.
Well, it comes down to Lesnar and Austin Theory. So I don't know what the in-match betting odds we're swinging towards here. But Lesnar removes his gloves. Austin Theory is trapped. He tries to lock himself in a pod, and Lesnar kicks his way in, suplexes Theory onto the floor, and Theory gets in a low blow. That was his big moment here, and hits a DDT for a 2 count. Theory then tries to climb the chamber and go through the roof. He was going to try and escape. He's pulled back. They're on top of the roof of the pod, and Theory is sent off of the top with an F5 onto the ground and then rolled into the ring and pinned in 14:56. Lesnar's your champion, and they go off the air promoting Lesnar Reigns, title versus title, champion versus champion at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I was very satisfied with this match, strictly for that run at the end from Brock Lesnar. Everything about it I just thought was awesome. From the entrance, where it wasn't even his time to come out, and the man just decides to kick through the pod to come out because he was sick of waiting, to the quick beat down of every single other person, to the chase of Austin Theory through another pod and up the cage and almost through the cage, and then that spectacular finish off of the pod. I thought everything about it was so great. It was like, like a velocity, like the T-Rex chase out of Jurassic Park, except this time the T-Rex actually wins. In Theory, I thought did a great job here too, running around, playing the mouse for the cat to chase, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
And after he pinned him, Lesnar gestured as if he was taking a selfie of Austin Theory, who was out there. And just to get the quote here, Andrew Thompson did recap the comments by Kazim Femude, who, if you're not familiar, was a former writer with WWE, and he was on the Ringer podcast. And after the show, he had stated that, "I have it under good authority that Lashley is shoot hurt and has been hurt since the Royal Rumble match against Brock Lesnar. If you noticed, he hasn't worked any Raws. He hasn't really defended his title. He was shoot hurt at the Lesnar match at the Rumble. And again, it was, or he says, I was wondering how they were going to work him in there while being hurt. And I'm assuming that this concussion protocol thing is the way to get him out there. And from what I'm told, it's at least 4 months shoulder surgery. So if again, I've not been able to confirm that, but it's obviously if he's facing surgery, there's no mania. And just given the way he was handled tonight, it would make sense to everything that all adds up. He has not wrestled since that Royal Rumble match 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, interesting, and of course unfortunate, given the
very
timing.
Unfortunate given the timing of everything. And that was the Elimination Chamber. I would say I didn't think any match on this show was at the level of the Edge Rollins match at the last Saudi Arabia show, but I found this to be, a show that went by very quick, like the 3 hours. I didn't think there was a whole lot of downtime or elements that dragged here. It has set up a few more ways for WrestleMania in terms of programs being brought into, and got the title change at the end. Like I thought it was like a satisfying show for what it was. I was not blown away by it, but it was still, it was a fine show.
Yeah, I would say it was a good show. It's never fun for me to praise these Saudi Arabia shows, but I'm also not gonna just pan it simply because it's taken place under shitty circumstances when all the participants and people involved do such a great job and work really hard to, put on great, entertaining professional wrestling. I thought the men's chamber match delivered, and in fact, I thought the Ronda match was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I thought the Lita match was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So, and you had a really great atmosphere with a really hot crowd.
And you got the Usos and Viking Raiders on top of it.
You almost got that, yeah. So we have no feedback from the actual thread, so I'm assuming a lot of people either didn't watch the show or don't have much to say about it, but I do believe one person was going to make a call, so let's go to Alex Francois in the chat room.
Hey guys, how you going? Where you all right?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, not too bad. As I was mentioning when we were chatting at the beginning, it was just, I was actually babysitting tonight and had the show in the background, and it was my friend's 5-year-old daughter. And one thing I found intriguing, she has never seen wrestling before, but she is now obsessed with Naomi after that entrance.
Wow.
And I think it just
cool.
shows, like, even though, like, AEW is the wrestling company, like, when it comes to production and things, like, WWE is still, like, the number one. I must have watched that entrance, like, 10 or 12 times tonight while she danced around the room and things. And it's just, like, it's just nice to do a bit of positive feedback, because most of the things when it comes to especially the Saudi shows where it's a bit questionable, everything around it and things, just to see like a real actual positive come out of it. And I just thought it would be nice to share rather than a bit of moaning for once from the wrestling audience. So yeah, whatever they're doing, might all think it's a bit weird and stuff like that. But yeah, they still have their power and know how to bring new fans in. Hopefully, new fans in.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly give myself and our audience, enough respect to understand that we can compartmentalize and understand that exactly why these shows are happening and the reasons politically, what exactly is going on here, while at the same time being able to praise certain elements about the show that I think actually deserves it. Maybe much like the production, where I think Naomi's entrance was really made for the big stage. So that's cool. Thank you for that, Alex.
No worries. The only other quick question I didn't have before the show was just when you guys mentioned about Goldberg comes in, loses, comes back, loses, gets another title shot. Like I was trying to think myself, but can you guys think of any way he could have been used better, maybe with either younger or less established talent, like maybe like sort of Sting has been in AEW, doesn't always lose, but being in the ring with them has helped many people. But I'll let you guys get on. It's late, Saturday. Cheers, guys. Thanks for everything as always.
Thank you for staying.
Thanks, Alex. I mean, in this case, like you did have him coming off the Lashley win, and therefore I didn't think it was like that much of a hurdle for people to accept this match with Reigns. You did have the history of them trying to put this match together 2 years ago. But yeah, you can only go to that well so often. I think Goldberg and Sting at their ages are still very different performers, and I don't think you're going to get that necessarily out of Goldberg. And to be honest, like I think like it's been several years now that we have been getting kind of these Goldberg matches, and they're very much based upon entrance, explosive fire, short matches, and people being into it. And they have had like a fair degree of success with it. Some better than others, but I think overall, you compare this to the first WWE run, I think they have done exceptionally better with Goldberg this time around for the most part.
Let's go up next to Hansi, who has something to say. Hansi, welcome to the show. What's up?
What's going on? As a one-off, I mean, because again, I watch, and I listen to the reviews of the build up to all this, right? And again, like maybe because I watched the weekly shows, like it wasn't really the most interesting card, but as a one-off, these cards are always like, I'm talking about the pay-per-views in general, like are always like kind of decent, but I honestly can't say that I'm excited for Mania season. Like even like at like when it's at its lowest a little bit, like I at least have some buzz for Mania a little bit because I'm curious of how it goes. Maybe Cody will come in through the build. I don't know what's going to end up happening. But like even with Austin being teased to come back, like if he's coming back to like face like Kevin Owens, it's not like Kevin Owens' character has been on fire the last couple of months. It's like just by that promo he cut about like doing this whole comedy type of deal where he's like kind of playing down Texas. Like to me, like it just doesn't seem like even like that would be worthy. And I'm just saying that like I'm mostly more excited for Revolution than I am for Mania, because I feel like that has more of a Mania level build between the MJF and Punk stuff. I'm just like I'm not really into the whole Brock and Roman Reigns thing, like the face and heel dynamic was cool for a little bit, but I'm just saying it's the same thing. I just don't feel really excited unless they have something up their sleeve. Then maybe I'll change my mind. But as a one-off show, this is pretty good. But I'm not really excited for Mania, and I'll just leave you guys with that. Thanks again for the show, guys.
Thanks,
Hansi. I mean, it's like they are throwing everything against the wall for WrestleMania. So if it doesn't have your interest, I mean, it's just, that's, some of their, you can certainly look at like their creative does not light a whole lot of people on fire, but in terms of, I think just general interest, I think it's going to be fairly high for this WrestleMania with Austin, with the potential of Cody, with, what they have planned with, outside stars. It's, I do feel like there's going to be quite a bit of buzz on WWE over these next 6 weeks with everything, once those angles are shot, especially.
Yeah, and all the promo and putting the machine behind it all, and NBC putting their promotional power behind it. So it really is like is in many ways a different product than what AEW is trying to create. Maybe a different market that they're trying to cater to, and WWE at times doesn't seem interested in the type of audience that AEW seems to want.
And remember that like Peacock just made like a huge, or we should say like NBC, to promote this during like the Super Bowl. Like you're coming off the Winter Olympics, a huge amount of the Olympics on Peacock. And WrestleMania is like one of those, like it's not a Super Bowl, but it's still, it's a driver for Peacock. And they are going to be very invested in aggressively promoting these two nights of WrestleMania. And you're going to see not just the WWE promotional muscle, but the NBC Peacock muscle behind these next six weeks on top of it. So I think that's worth following too, is the amount of integration of seeing talent on NBC properties presenting or promoting this, especially if you have an Austin in a comeback match. We wanted to chat about a few other news items before we sign off here. Starting off with the Kenny Omega interview that he did with Dave Meltzer and Garrett Gonzalez on Wrestling Observer Radio on Saturday. This is a really interesting interview that he did. It was nearly 2 hours in length, and I think there were two major themes to it. Number one being his update on his health, and the other being his reaction to the Cody Rhodes news, and just hearing from him about all of the different ailments that he has been dealing with for a long period of time, from neck issues, knee issues, the vertigo that we had heard him talk about in that Bo Hightower video, and also an umbilical hernia that he has not had operated on yet, but is going to get done, and then estimates after that procedure is done, needing probably 6 to 8 weeks to recover after that. So he had initially hoped to be back in February. That's obviously not going to be happening when you look at the calendar, but it sounds like he will be out for quite a bit of time, and it is rather remarkable when you hear all of these issues that had probably just become routine for him to work around instead of confront and deal with. And it seems like he's just trying to get a laundry list of issues taken care of at once.
That G1 match with Okada was a long time ago.
That was 2017.
Oh my God. And I mean, the man has had, he's done everything he has in that time, while continuing to battle. Like, just even whatever he's done over the past year, winning, Wrestling Observer, Wrestler of the Year, and having a schedule within different promotions, all the travel that's included with it as well. It really is amazing. So hopefully, now that he has the time off, he can actually take that time up and recover to the best of his abilities, because I think we all want to see him have a very long career.
Yeah, and I mean, it is one thing about, when we talk about how the level of pro wrestling is so high at the moment, is like the physical limitations that a lot of these high level performers are likely dealing with. I am sure Kenny Omega is not an isolated case of somebody that is working around plenty to put on these performances, and that kind of have that obsession with being regarded amongst that upper class of in-ring competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So the other part was on Cody, and this was, it was interesting for a lot of reasons, mainly with Kenny Omega's role within the company and being there, not at day one, but kind of phase one, because he did come in, several weeks after that initial press conference. But nonetheless, I think everyone associates him with being that core group of those that were there as AEW launched. And I think going into a whole lot more detail than Tony Khan was going to go into when you see the statements, when Tony Khan was on Busted Open on Friday. I mean, keeping it very limited and cordial about Cody and not wanting to go into any of the specifics. You got a lot more insight here from Kenny Omega, who didn't believe that Cody left over money, but more to do with going somewhere that was going to bring you more happiness. And he was pretty adamant that if you're not happy, it can lead to very bad things in this industry, and thinks that it was just ultimately conflicting visions of what this company would become. And however you want to couch it, like, this is a company built around Tony Khan's vision. He is the be all end all.
It wasn't always.
No. And that is like a very important aspect to all of this, is how this company was pitched to a Cody Rhodes by a Tony Khan to bring those people on board. Because if you remember, Cody was the one who said he was skeptical at the beginning with Tony Khan and whether this would be something, the route to go down, having heard, all of these different startups that have tried to get something going. And what was promised to Cody, what was sold to him. So I think that's worth noting as well. And I'm sure at some point we will hear more of Cody's side, but Kenny stated that the Bucks and Omega, they had a closer alignment in terms of their vision, and said that, going to war against Vince and WWE, that was not their MO. That is not the way the Bucks and Omega kind of want to approach this. And said that when Cody had his way of going about things, I wasn't sure how to follow up with that, nor was I interested. And in terms of the different visions, he said there was Kenny doing his thing, the Bucks doing their thing, and the Codyverse over there doing whatever it is that he does. And then there's the stuff that Tony does. And I would definitely encourage people to listen to this so you truly get the tone. I did not have this come across as negative towards Cody, but I think it was very clear to see a philosophical gap between Kenny Omega's vision of this company in wrestling and Cody's vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it never felt like at any point he was, slamming Cody or slandering him or anything like that. It just felt like a man speaking honestly. And
admitted that professionally we had a very good relationship, but we didn't hang out. We were not close like that outside of work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. This Cody Rhodes departure, we're still talking about it, almost a week out now. And it's because it carries with it so many ramifications. And I think so many potential insights about exactly what the makeup of AEW was at the beginning in its formative years, which we're still going through, but especially when it actually began, and what the chemistry might have been between the four EVPs and Tony Khan, and Yeah. Also, like how everything I don't think is as rosy as maybe it might have seemed to the audience. Getting so excited that this like seeing the ratings go do so well, seeing them defeat NXT. I mean, I would say for the most part it's been mainly positive, but it's not without its criticisms. It's not without its peaks and valleys. And now we get to learn about some of the valleys, including maybe portions of production that clearly were inconsistent because you had 4 different visions, including between the Bucks, Kenny, Cody, and Tony. And when at some point when we do like a rewind away, or like when a podcast comes out reviewing old episodes of AEW, knowing maybe some of the insight that we're starting to know right now, we can look at it maybe from a bit of a different lens. But I also think it explicitly tells you, like, when a Cody segment specifically confuses and it fails, much of that is strictly down to the guy deciding to go out there and say the things that he's saying, and not so much the company itself. And you can envision, Cody going out there and cutting a confusing promo, somebody like Kenny being just as unhappy with it. I don't know that specifically. I'm just saying as an example. So, this is all really interesting simply because we get to know a bit more. I mean, all the stuff about Cody maybe not seeing the vision coming to fruition in AEW, I do understand if that would be a reason for him to leave. I don't understand why he would go to the WWE as a remedy for that. Like, I don't see any positive to go to the WWE besides the money. Besides the potential exposure, maybe in a mainstream sense, if that's what he's looking for. But even that, I think, is a question mark, because if they book you like shit, what is that going to do for your mainstream reputation?
Well, and again, I go back to, I think a huge part of this is what was Cody sold on versus what ultimately happened. Like, what we do know is that at the end of 2019, after the 1 week where they did lose to NXT, and that was Tony Khan's decision. And listen, Tony Khan is the one fronting this thing. Like, it's his family's money that is in here. It's his name that is out there. And he decided to take things under control for himself. And
the show's been better.
It clearly has been better. And I think ultimately you take that input, but you do need to have that final person and someone that he has a great wrestling mind. I don't think too many people are going to look at AEW and say this is a poorly booked company. You might have your qualms with certain characters, certain stories that don't resonate with you, but as a whole, this is wrestling booking is a strength of this company. It's not a weakness. And Cody could say, listen, that's all fine. That's not what I was sold on. And going to the WWE, it's as much that I did not get what I was promised here. And I'm going somewhere where at least I know what the game is. And that's, that's for Cody to answer.
But the game is no fun. It's a game where you might not even get a starting position. Like, at least it's not a guarantee.
Oh, it's a risk. Like, if it's not about the money and you're talking about just professional satisfaction with your work, it's a huge gamble going to WWE that you will be creatively fulfilled. And
I mean, Kenny does mention, okay, maybe Cody would have outside interest, even outside of the professional wrestling industry. And that could very well be part of his thinking. I mean, I imagine it has to be part of his thinking. That seems to be the trajectory of his career, doing, as much as he is between the reality show and the game show. But even then, like, he's not strictly giving up a prime wrestling role in a promotion that he's founded. He's not just giving up a backstage role that he would foreseeably have for life. He's also potentially giving up that relationship with TNT where he's on that game show, potentially giving up the reality show gig as well. So, I just don't really see the benefit other than money. But
yeah, we should also mention, I guess tonight, just before 7 p.m. on his Instagram story, he did throw up this image. And I mean, I feel this is just, being sent out there to draw everyone's attention. But he put up a photo of his child with the dog and just wrote, "This is what retirement looks like." So I don't know. I don't really read into social media posts as any kind of grand direction being revealed, but nonetheless, he did post that on Saturday night. So it's a very insightful interview on many fronts. I think the Cody stuff is going to get the most attention because I don't see anyone else in that inner circle, pardon the pun, in AEW going that deep into the story. And the only other one I could see is Cody, and I don't know. I don't know when he maybe will opt to kind of share his side, and I think he may have I'm sure he has a very valid side for himself here. And on top of that, the fact that what has been reported is that there was an option that if this was an option that it was Tony Khan's to enact, opted not to, and by not doing that, it could certainly create issues like with your network partners that are invested in this guy much more than just a character on your wrestling franchise. Like this guy was the one that they have really earmarked as the one we are going to plug from AEW and promote across the network. And we have all these commitments. And you're telling me that our Go Big Show judge is now on the other wrestling competitors network and not on ours? Like that is, and maybe it was just a sign that, listen, we have gone through several years here. We're at different places philosophically. Maybe it is best that we just go our separate ways. And that's publicly how it's been presented. But of course, that there's going to be many questions with such a major move like that.
It is a bit of a messy breakup, isn't it? As cordial as I think, the two parties seem to be right now. I mean, there's just so much entrenched with Cody Rhodes' own businesses and financials and everything else attached to the DNA of AEW, like even talking about the Nightmare Factory and his brother being a head coach of one of the, of their burgeoning talent. It's just so much is tied in together that I feel like we'll continue to see the ramifications of down the next few weeks.
I just wanted to quickly go over the main event from the New Japan show in Hokkaido on Saturday morning. It saw SANADA win his first singles championship in New Japan, winning the U.S. title from Hiroshi Tanahashi. I thought this was a really enjoyable match. It went 29 minutes and 26 seconds, but I thought the pacing was very strong. The idea here was that SANADA was able to beat Tanahashi in a technical wrestling match. And they built this around, Tanahashi consistently going after the knees. At one point, even put SANADA in his own paradise lock, busted out the aces high to the floor. And, technically, like this was a very strong match between these two. The closing stretch saw Tanahashi hit the twist and shout multiple times, followed by a sling blade, but then SANADA rolled through on the aces high into a TKO, hit the moonsault on Tanahashi's back, and then goes for a follow-up moonsault, misses it, and Tanahashi then had his own miss and with the high fly flow and got caught with the Japanese leg roll clutch at 29-26. And they put this over as like such a signature win for SANADA in his career, defeating Tanahashi and winning his first singles title. And the show also saw Goto and Yoshihashi retain the tag titles over Evil and Yujiro. The junior heavyweight tag team four-way resulted in Taguchi and Master Wato winning the belts from Robbie Eagles and Tiger Mask. The match also featured Desperado and Kanemaru and Taiji Ishimori and El Phantasmo. Those were the top matches. And then tonight's show, which starts at midnight Eastern, has the Kazuchika Okada Tetsuya Naito match for the IWGP title and the dog cage match between Minoru Suzuki and Toru Yano as your top matches in Hokkaido.
Hearing a lot about this dog cage match, maybe more so than some of these other matches. So, yeah, maybe we'll discuss a bit of that on the next time.
Yes, there's lots going on tonight. There's Impact's got their No Surrender show. GCW has a show. UFC, Bellator, AAA, Rey de Reyes, packed night. But we are going to wind things down, and that is going to wrap up our Elimination Chamber post show. So thanks to everybody for tuning in live. What is on the siteway as we speak?
We have on the Post Wrestling Cafe feed, which is actually, this particular show is accessible to anybody who goes there at postwrestlingcafe.com. You can check out the latest edition of Postmarks, which is our show that profiles members of the post wrestling audience. In this case, one of the post wrestling hosts, and Chris, the Professor Ely. Chris from LA, many of you will have recognized from way back, frequent caller to the law, and now a contributor on the Newbie and Wrestling Advocates here on Post. But this is a podcast where Bruce Lord and David Myers just basically interview, longtime listeners of the show about how they got into the professional wrestling as a fan, how they got into podcasts, at least being a fan, how they got into hosting podcasts in this instance, and in Chris's case as well, getting to a bit about his recent health struggles as well, and providing us an update on that. So great job, Bruce and David, on Postmarks, and postwrestlingcafe.com is where you can go and download that show.
All right, you can check out all of that. Wai and I will be back Monday at 1 Eastern for the post-daily news update, and then Rewind to Raw Monday night at 11:15 Eastern, which should be a pretty noteworthy Raw as they narrow in now on the picture for WrestleMania with 6 weeks to go and where everything goes next.
I mean, is Cody Watch? I feel like Cody Watch began today. Do you think the speculation will be that much higher on Monday?
Certainly, yes. Yes, I think that everyone is going to be focused on it. What would you think would be the most valuable way to introduce him, just in terms of? I know a lot of people think like the surprise route is the best way to go. I think like the idea of teasing it ahead of time would be wise. Like I think he's a big enough one.
Why not do both? Why not do the announcement on Raw, or at least like have him like do what they used to do, have him pop up, and then next week is when he delivers a message.
Yeah, I think we're kind of saying the same thing. Like whether you run a vignette or something that Cody is coming, like that's the way I would go. I think just showing up unannounced, like milk this. Like it's a huge story. Let people wait for it. And like I think that the CM Punk template is that you dangle something out there, let people know what's coming, and you still get like huge reaction, and you have the attention because people know what's coming.
Here's a question: would you put him on Raw or SmackDown?
I guess it depends on where the best program is. Like SmackDown just feels so loaded with stars at the moment that they like from Ronda, like Brock and Reigns. You figure that will be mainly housed on SmackDown.
Probably both shows, given that they're both champions on both sides, right?
And on top of it, you don't have a championship on Raw, so like you could certainly see Austin and Owens being built on Raw. And Cody being on Raw certainly makes this show like that, to me, supersedes a title, which you are in theory without for 6 weeks.
Yeah, will be interesting.
So that is happening on Monday night. We will chat with you then. Have a great weekend. And that is going to wrap up our post show.